This is the appointed time. I call to order the meeting. This meeting is scheduled to end at 5:30 p.m. If necessary, I will extend the meeting by 15 minutes at the most. If you have any direct or indirect pecuniary interests regarding the discussion items today, please, in accordance with the requirements under 83A of the Rules of Procedures, declare the nature of such interests before you speak. Please also refer to Rule 84 of the ROP for rules regarding voting in case of direct pecuniary interest. We're dealing with one item today, FCR Bracket 2252644. This item invites members to approve the creation of a new commitment of $180 million under the INT Fund, Head 111, Innovation and Technology for implementing the pilot INT Accelerator scheme. The item was discussed by the panel on Commerce, Industry, Innovation and Technology on the 20th of May 2025. To respond to members' inquiries, we have Professor Sun Dong, Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry, Mr. Ivan Lee, Commissioner for INT, and Ms. Jenny Lee, Assistant Commissioner for INT here. I will first invite Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Chairman of the panel on Commerce, Industry, Innovation and Technology, to give us a report on the discussion at the panel. Thank you, Chairman. At the meeting on the 20th of May 2025, the panel had a discussion on the administration's proposal on setting up the $180 million pilot innovation and technology accelerator scheme. Members in general support the submission of this financial proposal to the FC for scrutiny. Members were concerned how the administration would ensure the participating service providers' financial capacity and management quality, so that they can effectively support local startups in their initial stage of development and transformation of R&D outcomes. Members also asked how the proposed eligibility and assessment criteria could help ensure that the scheme will yield results. Also, members were concerned whether the support offered by the administration could effectively boost the chances of success for startups. The administration responded to members' concerns and questions at the meeting. Chairman, that's all from me on the report. Thank you, Mr. Lam. 11 members have asked to speak. I'll read out their names. Mr. Lam Chun Sing, Dr. So Chun Wing, Mr. Kenneth Fogg, Mr. Chen Xiu Hong, Mr. Kenneth Leung, Mr. Brave Chen, Ms. Nixie Lam, Ms. Elizabeth Quat, Professor William Wong, Ms. Lillian Kwok, and Professor Priscilla Leung. Mr. Lam Chun Sing will go first. 5 minutes, please. Thank you, Chairman. The administration is not asking for a huge sum, only $180 million for the funding. In the past, the administration often asked for billions of dollars, so this is not a huge sum of money that we are looking at. This pilot scheme is proposed to offer support to startups, but there are similar services currently offered by the Cyberport as well as the Science and Technology Park. They offer venues as well as mentorship programs. My question is, this proposed pilot scheme, compared to the services currently being provided by the Cyberport and the Science and Technology Park, what are the differences? We don't want to see resource wastages. Also, you said you have come up with some assessment criteria. You'll look at their mode of operation as well as experience and their capital. Are there any other indicators? For example, will you look at the track records of the service providers in and outside Hong Kong? For example, will you look at the number of success cases from these service providers to see if you would disperse funding to them? Also, according to your knowledge, are there any other potential applicants that might be interested in joining this pilot scheme, either from the mainland or overseas? Lastly, you said that to assess the service provider's performance, you will ask them to submit financial reports and you will look at their management structure. You look at whether they will hire any full-time staff. But this might not be enough. You have to actually look at whether they will be able to offer support to startups for major development. Of course, it will depend on many factors. For example, if the relevant industry is subject to sanctions, it might be hard for the startups concerned to achieve success. But how many startups do you think will benefit from service providers under this scheme? Secretary, I thank Mr. Lam for the questions. On the first question, our cyberport as well as the science park as well as some local universities have been making investments and have been offering incubation programs to startups, but accelerators are different. Accelerators from the mainland as well as overseas, well, they offer accelerator programs. And one of the features about accelerators is that through rapid commercial operations, they bring together a group of enterprises and they offer accelerator programs to them. We have incubation programs in Hong Kong, and we need the participation of the relevant sectors. We are learning from success cases in Hong Kong and outside Hong Kong. Well, we haven't approved any applications yet, but some well-known enterprises have already offered support. For example, we have a batch of accelerators in the cyberport. They have rented some 27,000 square feet of spaces, but this is not enough. We need more. On the assessment criteria, I will invite Mr. Ivan Lee to tell you more. On the assessment criteria, we've actually set out the details in paragraph 11 of the paper. We will look at whether there are any successful examples from the service providers. For example, if they have successfully incubated any startups in or outside Hong Kong. We look at whether they offer any value-added services and whether they have the business networks to bring in potential startups for development in Hong Kong. And this is related to question 3 asked by Mr. Lam, that is how we will gauge the effectiveness of the pilot scheme. We will ask the service providers to provide financial reports as well as their business reports. Our expectation is that these service providers will be able to bring in potential companies to Hong Kong, and that these potential companies will expand themselves in Hong Kong. So these are factors that we're going to look at. Dr. So Chun Wing. Thank you, Chairman. Startups with the support of professional service providers will benefit, and this is very meaningful to them, and this shows how we can ensure diversified development and how we can enhance the INT ecosystem. Paragraph 14 of the paper echoes the question asked by Mr. Lam Chun Sing just now. He will ask the service providers to submit business reports and financial statements and so on. My question is, will the administration come up with KPIs for these startup service providers? You said that funding will be dispersed to service providers in phases. Will you follow fixed interval in relation to the phased disbursement? How will you disperse the funding? Secondly, you said the government has the right to terminate the project. I believe the government will not do so arbitrarily. You'll definitely stick to a set of standards in terms of when you will terminate the project or cancel the disbursement of funds, you'll have to stick to certain KPIs. If that's the case, what are the KPIs? Also, as we may all know, startups, especially tech startups, they have passion, but they are faced with a lot of challenges, oftentimes because of the market situation or other unforeseeable factors. They had to terminate their business. While service providers may work very hard, if such a situation arises, what should they do? They may not be able to yield any results under the scheme. Under what circumstances will the government cancel the disbursement of funds or terminate the project? Lastly, will you prioritize certain industry, for example, AI as well as life and health technologies? 3 questions, Professor Sun. Firstly, I thank Dr. So for the support. The core of the first 2 questions asked by Dr. So are about KPIs, that is how we will gauge the success and failure of the startup service providers. Just now, Mr. Ivan Lee has already disclosed some details. I want to stress here that the accelerators under the scheme will provide resources as well as systematic training, including capital venue, research resources, mentorship, as well as expert support to help startups grow and expand their scale in the market. So we will look at these factors. They have brought in startups, but how will the service providers assist startups in growing? We will look at these factors. I think the core is, regardless of the number as well as the quality of the startups brought by these service providers, will there be any improvement or progress? These startups are well selected. So incubators and accelerators are different. These service providers will already have brought in startups from overseas, and accelerators will help these startups grow. These startups are not familiar with the situations in Hong Kong, so they need resources in order to save cost. Once they have secured a stable development in Hong Kong, they will be able to stand on their own feet. So we will see high success rate for startups which are supported by the service providers. We have life and health technologies, AI, as well as robotics, and high quality development. These are all the major directions we're going to take as we grow our industries. So promising startups will mainly come from these industries.
Next, Mr. Kenneth Fuk. I have 2 questions, but first let me express support for the proposal. I want to ask questions on the logic. I want to ask in particular for paragraph 12. It is said an assessment panel will be set up comprising members with extensive experience in technology, business, or investment. They are essentially experts. But it also says the Secretariat will conduct preliminary assessments. I have found out more about the vetting process. Basically, the Secretariat would have already given all the scores, and the panel would just do an endorsement or confirm the results. I want to ask, if you are involving members with extensive experience, why not have them do more in the process? If you're talking about 100 or 200 projects, I think the Secretariat would need to do more gatekeeping. But then if you don't have many projects, I think we would not need the Secretariat to do as much of a gatekeeper role. We should involve the expert members more. I also want to ask about how you would want those service providers that have experience supporting tech startups in the mainland and overseas, and they will need to engage 3 full-time staff members. Do you have any requirements on whom the staff members have to be, what they have to work in? Can a cleansing staff member suffice, or a receptionist suffice? I also want to ask, so you will have also regard to local staff members. So I want to ask, when you're giving the funding, will it only be for local staff members? It will not provide for funding for mainland or overseas staff members? Thank you. I'll let Mr. Ivan Lee answer this question. Thank you, Chair. For the assessment panel's work, let me elaborate on their work. Once we have set up the assessment panel, apart from looking at the individual projects, for the implement details, including the assessment criteria, we will consult the panel on these aspects. As for what the Secretariat is going to do before the assessment panel looks at the projects, we would say that would include due diligence checks, because we have some information to be submitted by the service providers, including some records or information detailing their experience. So we will have the Secretariat staff conduct preliminary assessments in the form of comprehensive assessments, preliminary vetting. We may have the Secretariat give some scores for certain aspects, but then the decision should be reached by the assessment panel, and the assessment panel can also ask through the Secretariat the service providers to provide more information for their determination. Next, for full-time staff members that have to be local staff members, this is just a basic requirement. We will see also what the accelerators can provide in terms of value-added services. If they focus on a particular technology area, they may want to provide laboratory facilities for the startups for their R&D work. They may also engage non-full-time, part-time staff members in Hong Kong or outside Hong Kong, perhaps some mentors that have actual startup support experience. And if they have such in their expenses, if the relevant requirements are met, we may cover such expenses as well in our funding. More importantly, they need to prove how the expenses are related to the accelerator support to startups. Sorry, Chair, I have a follow-up question. A simple question. It says that the Secretary will conduct preliminary assessments. I think you can provide more details so as to clarify what the Secretariat's work is actually is going to do. We do not want it to sound like the assessment panel is just providing confirmation. Alright, so it's just matter of wording. I would also ask Mr. Ivan Lee to speak closer to the microphone in future. Thank you. Mr. Chen Su-hong. Thank you. Cyberport Science Park have been providing incubator and accelerator services to local startups, and this April the Science Park has Accelerator scheme that involves public-private partnership. It's the first of its kind in Hong Kong. And we have also the INT-oriented fund of the government that shows the government's determination to engage the private sector more in incubating and accelerating startup operations. I think it is a good direction to take because we are making good use of resources of the public and private sectors to support startups. Now, for the pilot INT Accelerator scheme, we are trying to attract more professional startup service providers with proven track records to set up Accelerator bases in Hong Kong. It is essentially us trying to recruit some very good managers to find the stars in the haystack and sign agreements with them, and then they can share their profits if the enterprises succeed. And we have, say, 500 global plug and play, these famous startup service providers. They help startups scale up. They also provide funding and support through their networks to the startups. And then they can share the startup's profit when the startups grow or list in the market. I think what's important is that we provide the right environment for startups to grow so that the service providers will be able to share the startup's profits in future. I don't think the startup service providers will necessarily be only attracted by the $30 million subsidy because I think it is too small for them. So I want to ask Professor Sun, for the famous startup service providers that you have talked to, are there really startup service providers of such scale that are interested in the 30 million subsidy? If there is, I have my reservations about such service providers. Recently, we have the Science Park Cyber Report and the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park providing services, funding, and other services support to startup, and that has already helped us accelerate application of R&D outcomes. What I'm thinking is, why not create more synergy? Because you will have to have a secretariat for this scheme. We already have similar bodies in the Cyberport or Science Park providing relevant functions. Why not share such structure with the Science Park or Cyberport? Thank you. Professor Sun. The first question was whether one would come for the $30 million subsidy. I would say this: we are at a new era. We need different resources from different parts of the world. Why I didn't mention this 2 to 3 years ago is because we need professionals. We need top-notch enterprises to recruit startups to Hong Kong. With our existing resources, we cannot really do that. We need to try to engage the private sector more, as you said. This is our vision. If you go to Europe or the United States, even the mainland, they have their industrial parks. And I need to say this: all the top-notch accelerators are operated by the private sector. The 30 million subsidy is not a lot, but it's not the most attractive thing. We need to show them Hong Kong is actively developing INT, but the $30 million subsidy will help in some way, definitely. As for whether there is synergy, whether there can be synergy, I would say this: it is best that we have a vibrant ecosystem in Hong Kong. And We have the science park and Cyberport doing their different things, and we have the accelerator scheme doing its own thing as well. And we may have, say, an accelerator that will recruit more startup enterprises, and in fact the Cyberport will soon have a launch ceremony where they will talk about how they have recruited 70 startups with an accelerator. So we can see how successful it can be. Thank you, Mr. Kenneth Flood. I support the proposal. We often talk about how we need to create impetus for growth, and this is how we can do so. In implementation, I have some questions for the administration. For paragraph 8, we've talked about what the funding scope would cover. It would cover, say, engaging industry expert and marketing. So I want to ask for this in particular. Does that have to be for the accelerator specifically, or the teams as well, the startup teams? The 11th paragraph talks about the assessment criteria. It says that benefits to the INT startups ecosystem in Hong Kong takes up only 10% weighting. If in future the service provider does not make Hong Kong their base and transfer their outcomes to elsewhere, it will not be beneficial to the INT startups ecosystem in Hong Kong. Why not increase the weighting so that we can make sure it benefits Hong Kong? Thank you, Professor Sun. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. Regarding what the funding is used, I would say we can cover expenses for marketing for the startups, but then we also want to make sure we can safeguard the success of the accelerators. We want to engage the commercial network for their support, perhaps in marketing the accelerators. I think the ITC will do comprehensive assessments on this. So there's no restriction on where the marketing is used, whether it is used on the accelerator service provider itself or the startup teams. Yes, Mr. Ivan Lee. I would say when we say that we cover expenses for engaging industry expert and marketing, we want them to make sure the resources are used on the startup teams. We understand that these are generally value-added services provided by accelerator service providers. It is because they would want to engage entrepreneur experts to provide mentorship as a value-added service. We do not have hard restrictions on this at the moment. We will look at the work reports and the different expenses, whether the weighting is appropriate, and we will consult the assessment panel for advice when we make a determination. As for what Mr. Leung said about the 10% weighting for benefits to the INT startups ecosystem in Hong Kong, it seems relatively low. We actually talked about this at the panel meeting. This is a requirement when we are recruiting the accelerators. We believe some may not have experience running such operations in Hong Kong, which is why we are looking at their experience to see how they have supported startups in the past. Once they have grown, if they have to continue receive support from the scheme, we will look at their reports to find out more about their operations, what companies they have supported, what support they gave to companies, and the company's performance. We will do more in scrutinizing their performance in future, which is why we assign a relatively low weighting to the benefits to the INT startups ecosystem in Hong Kong. Sorry, I want to ask, when you receive their proposal, you can already see their experience of the startup service provider before. Thank you, Mr. Ivan Lee.
Mr. Lee? Yes, we will look at the service provider's experience outside Hong Kong and their economic contribution to the relevant places. This is a very important indicator. Mr. Brave Chen. Thank you, Chairman. I believe we all support the overall direction because we are an international INT center and we can leverage the service providers in order to make the achievement. Well, how will we be able to gauge the success of the startup service providers? How do you assess the achievements of the service providers? Also, we want to attract top-notch service providers to land in Hong Kong, and we will look at their track records. For service providers with good track records, they are trawled for by different places. What if they back out in the middle of the program when they find that $30 million is not enough? Places around the world are all trawling for top-notch service providers. 2 questions. Professor Sun. On gauging the success of service providers, we look at whether the startups that got the support from the accelerators are able to stand on their own feet in Hong Kong. We hope that a few years later, we'll be able to see enterprises like Huawei and Tencent experiences from overseas and domestically tell us that this is important. We need to see whether the accelerators are able to help generate a large batch of high quality and international companies. But of course, we can't stop there. What matters is whether Hong Kong is attractive enough to retain these startups. We have to keep growing our INT ecosystem. Apart from startups, many enterprises are trying to come to Hong Kong to expand their businesses. Our success lies in international enterprises. We want these enterprises to set up headquarters in Hong Kong. We want them to get listed here and have their settlement done here. As long as we retain our attractiveness and as long as we keep promoting high quality development, I'm confident that we'll be able to keep these enterprises here. Enterprises which started their businesses as startups in Hong Kong will become homegrown enterprises here. Well, while you are confident about Hong Kong, how can you ensure that service providers or startups will be able to devote their resources in Hong Kong? Well, accelerators that choose to come to Hong Kong definitely have their own special mission. They probably have seen great development elsewhere and they probably face certain constraints and that's why they have to come to Hong Kong. I believe these enterprises that choose to come to Hong Kong will expand their businesses here and tap into the international market here. Ms. Nixie Lam. Well, technological development does not happen overnight. Investments will not yield results overnight either. My question is this. Accelerators are brought in to help build our INT ecosystem. Will the government, based on their strengths and tech areas, come up with different assessment criteria? Let me give you an example. Take life and health technology as an example. You might want to focus on the clinical results or research. For AI, you may want to look at the tech companies that they're able to bring in. Different industries face different situations, and so we cannot abide by the same set of assessment criteria or standards for enterprises from different industries. I think Ms. Nixie Lam is highlighting our objective for the different accelerators. Each accelerator has their own unique environment, and that's where Accelerator comes in. They have to have certain understanding on companies and enterprises in Hong Kong, and they will provide tailor-made services and resources for our enterprises. So you are right that the development paths for different enterprises are different. That's exactly why we need professional startup service providers with experiences in and outside Hong Kong to work with the government, and we are pulling together resources from the public and private sector this way. It's hard for us to stick to one set of standards for startups or accelerators from different industries. Some startups may have already experienced their hardest time, and they find development room in Hong Kong. Now take startups from agriculture industry as an example. They may be able to see great development elsewhere, but probably not in Hong Kong. And same for life and health technologies. They may identify room for development in Hong Kong as well, so it really depends. Professor William Wong. I very much support this pilot INT accelerator scheme. I think Mr. Chen Xiu-hong gave a very good explanation about the situation. Schools offer support to startups as well, but startups lack professional experiences, and a lot of times they fail to grow their businesses. Now with professional support, they will see greater chances of success. As mentioned by Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, the Science Park is offering similar services. So it is crucial that we identify the right service providers from the right area. So the Science Park may not be able to focus on individual or specific industries, so I support this program. Just now a member asked about the weighting of 10% for one of the assessment criteria. Just now the commissioner said that the administration will look at the business performances of the applicants. Will there be an assessment panel to be set up to make sure that the accelerators or the relevant startups will be able to see development in Hong Kong? Now, I talked about the Science Park And just now there was a question about whether the Secretariat and the assessment panel will duplicate their efforts. You said you will select at least 6 accelerators. Would it be possible for one single accelerator to manage 2 to 3 startups at the same time? Then they can share their secretariats. Now my third question is more specific. Say we have a project from a school or a project from a startup. They may get resources from both the government and investors. So oftentimes the question lies in who is offering funds to the project first. And the startup often ended up waiting for a long time for the funding. We don't want this to happen in this program. We have the government, we have the investors, as well as the startups. And the startups that are sandwiched between the government and the investors may have a hard time waiting for funding. Secretary, I want to ask Mr. Lee to respond. Now, on the first question, when these accelerators apply for funding, they'll have to provide a concrete work plan. For example, what kind of companies will they bring to Hong Kong and what kind of value-added services they will provide here. I believe that companies who choose to come to Hong Kong for a reason, for example, the international environment here, or they want to come here to go global, or to tap into the mainland market. When we look at the applicant's proposal, we will look at what kind of value-added services the applicants will provide for the INT ecosystem here. We are going to set up a secretariat under the INT Commission. The secretariat will conduct due diligence checks, and they will pass the relevant information to the assessment panel. We will also do site visits to ensure regular monitoring on the subsidized service providers. These service providers will provide expert mentorship, and they may also set up labs to offer research support to startups. So there are 2 different secretariats to be set up. Now, under this pilot scheme, there will be no investment elements. For regular expenditure of the service providers, we provide a matching funding of 1 to 2. For accelerators that are going to invest in value-added services that's outside our funding scope.
Yes, member, you have a follow-up question. I just want to say, for the accelerator, would you allow it to apply for are they allowed to support more than one spin-off company? Well, if you're talking about the number of companies supported by the accelerator, I believe there should be more than one. Each accelerator should be supporting 20 to 30 companies. I believe this is in general how accelerators work. They do not support companies one-to-one. Thank you. Ms. Lillian Kwok, I want to make some clarifications. We have members ask about how the accelerators are going to support the startups, but as I understand, it is the case an accelerator should already be an established company they're not an incubator either, so the startups involved should also be somewhat established. So how can we make sure the performance is more effective in the sense that we would have the science park or cyberpod invited to participate in the accelerator scheme, or they can make some recommendations on accelerators, or we can have room to accommodate perhaps an incubator. I also want to ask about the operations, the financial management side of things. You will provide funds on a 1:2 matching ratio. You will also scrutinize the finances of the accelerators. I have a question on this. I can see in the mainland the accelerators may charge administrative fees. In such cases, how can the accelerators operate on a self-financing basis, or are they essentially investing in the startups? If the accelerators are making losses, will you terminate the service providers' contracts? How often will you review the service providers to see whether they need to be replaced? Thank you, Professor Sun. Thank you for the members' questions. I believe for your first question, that's the accelerator's decisions. We, of course, want them to recruit good companies to Hong Kong. And if it is agreeable to accelerators, we think it is possible to include some incubation services. The RTC attaches great importance to the finances of the accelerators, and as I said earlier, the funds are provided on a 1:2 matching basis. And for each dollar they spend, 1/3 comes from us. We would want to make sure they are using that on the startups. And the government also has a stringent audit system. And let me emphasize again, the funds are provided on a 1:2 matching basis with one from the government. Yes, Ms. Lillian Kwok, you have more follow-up questions. So I want to know, how can you make sure in the long term the accelerators can operate on a self-financing basis? Well, I would say accelerators, even without the government support, we may still want to, if they are not doing well, we may still want to support them, because in the end they are recruiting more companies to Hong Kong. And with this subsidy provided by the government, it is probably just some help provided to the service providers. After the 3 years, we may consider expanding the scheme if it is providing great benefits, so that we will have more service providers. This is a pilot scheme that will last for 3 years. I believe, however, this scheme will be of great success. Chair, I have more questions. If the enterprises are operating on a commercial basis, they may charge fees. But in the long term, if they're trying to profit from this, will they overcharge the startups? We don't want that, because the accelerators are supported by the government. So I hope the government can make sure that doesn't happen. We do note this comment of the member. Thank you. Professor Priscilla Leung. I very much support this pilot INT accelerator scheme. Early September, we had the IMD say that we have ranked first in graduates in Hong Kong, and we ranked the third in financial support provided to enterprises. But then I have also had recently an interview with the media, and I was asked, why is there no proper industrialization of application of R&D outcomes? I want to ask the secretary, with this funding, you will ask the accelerators to each engage at least 3 full-time staff members. I would also say the $180 million figure is not a lot. It is just a sign of support. I think it is only the case that INT companies with great potential will join the accelerator programs. In the process, with the funding, with the subsidies, we'll be able to recruit the accelerators and companies. Will we maybe encourage local graduates to join the accelerators? How can we make sure there is collaboration between the administration, the industry, the academia, and the research sector? We have given some funding. We will be giving some funding to the service providers. How can we make sure maybe we can also engage the financial professionals so that we can help the service providers and startup companies get more in funding? Thank you, Professor Sun. I think we need to focus in particular on what companies the accelerators can recruit and bring into Hong Kong. We will have the accelerators serve dozens of enterprises. If they develop in Hong Kong, they will be able to hire dozens or even hundreds of people in Hong Kong each. So if we have, say, an accelerator having 70 to 80 companies to Hong Kong, we will see even greater benefits, and it will be very attractive to talents because these will provide great work opportunities for the graduates. I believe Professor Leung is saying, even though it may be a commercial decision, how we can perhaps have these companies hire local graduates more. I believe the priority will always be them engaging local graduates. Yes, Professor Leung, I would say this. Honestly, I'm not trying to be overly protective of local students, but I'm just saying if we have that many companies, and I believe the companies will need financial and tech professionals. If you have, say, 100 companies here, they would probably want some guidance because they have to compete for such professionals. And if we can perhaps match talents to the companies, it will be a win-win situation. I would say that for the companies brought in by the accelerators, they can apply for any kind of support in Hong Kong, say INT fund. They can apply for the different funding schemes of the government for setting up a production lines, or the INT oriented fund. They can apply for any funding scheme of the government. We do not have restrictions on this. It's just that for the accelerators, we have imposed some restrictions, and they need to provide basic services to the companies. Mr. Eric Yim. Thank you, Chair. I have 3 questions for the Secretary. So we have the Science Park, Cyberport, and the Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park having their own incubator programs. So I want to ask, for the 3 incubator programs, do they have similar standards? Are there any plans of the government to combine the 3 entities incubator programs into one so that we can achieve better synergy? In paragraph 14 of the paper, we talked about how in case of non-compliance with the requirements of the scheme, unsatisfactory progress, or breach of the relevant agreements, the government reserves the right to suspend the funding, support, or even terminate the project, cancel the disbursement of funds. I want to ask, in recent years, how many of such cases are found in the government's INT funding schemes? Has there been any instances where we have requested a return of disbursed funds? If it is the case, how many projects are involved in such cases, and what is the amount recovered? Now, in the last 2 years, we had the RTIB being compared to other bureaus, having come to the electrical for funding the most. And I believe the Finance Committee has really approved all of the funding applications. We will soon have the policy address delivered, and I want to ask, what is the RTIB's plan for the coming years? Perhaps maybe in the next year, will we have less projects of or schemes of the Bureau that would require funding? We do want to provide support, but we want to seek some clarification on the future plans of the Bureau. Well, I would say the third question is not exactly related to this item. It will also depend on whether the Secretary has more information on this. We also need to think about how this is a policy-related question. Secretary, please. Thank you. Regarding whether the incubator programs of the 3 entities can be combined, that is of the Cyberport, Science Park, and HSITP, we have different priorities for the different entities. Cyberport would focus on data science, AI, blockchain, internet security. The Science Park also has some in AI, but they mainly focus on advanced manufacturing. The HSITP is also unique in its technological foci. So we have the different programs having different characteristics, unique characteristics, and I think minor competition can be beneficial to development. We want to have a vibrant ecosystem in Hong Kong, and I think it can be beneficial. Let me also tell you about some figures. The INT fund, as well as the funds of the Science Park, we have invested in over 100 enterprises. We have spent over $1.1 million, but we have also attracted investment from the private sector of $18.3 billion. It is a 17-fold return on our investment. As for how we can request a return on disbursed funds or cancel disbursements, Mr. Ivan Lee should be able to provide you with more details on previous instances. I don't think there are that many cases, though, because it would mean we are not doing well enough in gatekeeping. We have had instances where we even had to call the police. But I would say most projects are beneficial to Hong Kong. As for the third question on what we're going to do in the next year, let me say to Mr. Eric Yim and members, we would like to thank you for your support for approving funding in the last 3 years. But let me say this, we started at a very low point in INT development in Hong Kong, and we are trying to play catch up. We are trying to make for the basics before, and now we need a breakthrough. We are applying for a funding of $180 million. It's not much, but it will create impetus for growth, and that will be beneficial to the development of Hong Kong. And even internally in the government, we took much to come to the Legislative Council for funding. We don't want to come here for more funding support either, but we need to start somewhere. We need to make sure the basics are there. We started the $10 billion scheme before, and we will have more plans coming in the future. But this is what is happening in INT. If we don't do something now, we will not be able to see returns in future. And we need to do more for the continuous development of Hong Kong by doing this. This is my answer to Mr. Eric Yim. We have gone on for long enough, 6 minutes and 47 seconds. Next, Mr. Benson Look.
Thank you, Chairman. I support this pilot INT Accelerator program. Startups with certain foundation, with the support of the accelerators, they will definitely grow further. I have two concerns. First, on the expected outcomes. According to the paper, there will at least be 6 accelerators coming to Hong Kong. It is expected that they will bring $360 million of matching fund to the program. With enterprises as well as capital coming to Hong Kong, is of course beneficial to the city. But what matters is also to enrich and diversify the local INT ecosystem. For capital as well as enterprises coming to Hong Kong, how will they actually benefit from the program? Also, paragraph 7 is about targets of the scheme. According to the paper, these service providers will have to have at least 5 years of experience in supporting the development of tech startups. They will have to support documentary proof on this. However, we understand from previous cases that some organizations with ulterior motives may submit forged documents. So how can you ensure the smooth implementation of the scheme in this regard? Professor Sun, I thank Mr. Benson Look for the questions. On the first question, for startups from outside Hong Kong, how much will they benefit the local INT ecosystem? I think the fastest and the most effective way to build our ecosystem is to attract enterprises from all over the world to Hong Kong. Without talents, how can we build our ecosystem? We want to strengthen our INT ecosystem to create our own brands. We also want to have the entire industrial chain that would offer job opportunities to Hong Kong. Also, we need to attract talents from all over the world. Enterprises who come to Hong Kong and get listed here, they will earn revenue. Every day, we have enterprises that are listed here earning hundreds of millions of dollars here. With basic revenue, they'll be able to support scientific researchers here. So we need more enterprises. We want them to grow here. This will boost our GDP growth as well as our revenue. So for our INT sector to grow, we will need renowned enterprises. Take the Silicon Valley as an example. We see how they succeeded. Mr. Ivan Lee, the discussion we had just now mentioned that we will set up a small secretariat under the INT Commission. And one of the duties of the future secretariat is to conduct due diligence checks after it has received applications. I believe that applicants will have actual experiences in and outside Hong Kong. So we will verify the information they provide. We do not just need accelerator experiences. If enterprises can tell us that they have successfully cultivated tech startups elsewhere, we will check the relevant records. So we will ask the applicants to try their best to provide the relevant information. This will be one of the important duties of the future secretariat. Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chairman. My view is that over the past few months, some problems arose from government tendering exercises. For example, tendering exercises for bottled water as well as for sneakers. This may show that the standards the government set down may not be able to ensure safety. We might need more rules. My question is, after you've selected the accelerators, moving forward, how will you check how these accelerators are going to use the fund? You are going to offer a matching fund on a ratio of 1 to 2. The government will, at most, offer $30 million, and the service providers will chip in $16 million. When the government checks the expenditure of the accelerators, what kind of strategies will you adopt? How can you avoid, for example, false receipts from these accelerators sub-companies? After 3 years, there might be cases in which they actually did not end up chipping in $60 million, but they will have already taken the $30 million from the government. So how will you ensure a smooth implementation of the scheme in this regard? Also, I'm concerned whether the startups brought to Hong Kong will stay here for long-term development. What we don't want to see is that 2 or 3 years later, we have startups focusing on researches, but not any startups focusing on manufacturing or production. So how will you ensure that accelerators will help startups set up their manufacturing bases here so that we will see homegrown brands created in order to highlight our international standing? On the first question, the Commission just now said there would be stringent due diligence checks, but Mr. Dennis Leung's question is how stringent these checks will be. I'll ask Mr. Lee to tell you more. Mr. Lee, the matching fund will be offered on a reimbursement basis. Accelerators will have to first use their own funding for the expenditure first. Apart from giving reports to us, they will have to submit audited financial accounts. So there will need to be an independent auditor that helps audit the statements before we disperse the fundings on a reimbursement basis. Just now, Mr. Dennis Leung asked, will there be services provided by the sub-companies of the accelerators? We will impose certain standards on the procurement services, and all the relevant procedures will be conducted in a fair and impartial manner. Say, in situations where services will have to be provided by another contractor, they'll have to submit an application to our commission, and they'll all have to offer an explanation to us. We will make sure that taxpayers' money will be used effectively. The second question is, how will you ensure the long-term development of the landed startups? Now, let me talk about what will happen if companies don't end up coming to Hong Kong. That's why we have the accelerators. We want them to bring in startups to Hong Kong to speed up their development here. It's not that we have the accelerator scheme and we just leave the startups alone. We want to make sure through this scheme that the development of the startups will be expedited. The government is going to offer subsidies to the accelerators, but the accelerators will have to make sure that the startups will see long-term development here first. They shouldn't stir up any trouble here. They should grow their businesses here. Also, take Huawei as an example. We all know that it is a company in Shenzhen. If these companies can get listed in Hong Kong, they won't leave easily. As long as they can take root in Hong Kong, we will ensure long-term development of these companies. Not every company will have to set up their manufacturing base here. Mr. Ring Kong, I know that many governments around the world have similar accelerator programs. In New Zealand, there are about 30 incubation or accelerator programs. In Singapore, there are more, about 320 such companies. We're offering this matching fund because obviously we think that there aren't enough accelerators here. I want to know how many accelerator companies we have in Hong Kong currently. Footnote 4 of the paper mentions that participating startups under the scheme, we have to make sure that they are not receiving other public funding in relation to the participation of the accelerator programs. Why is there such a restriction? Is this kind of restriction common? The startups that are going to join the programs may be receiving public funding from other programs. So is this restriction too stringent, and are there other places that impose the same kind of restriction? Also, accelerators under the scheme will be able to use the $30 million to do a lot of things. In other places, what matters most is that accelerators can offer support to startups to get capital and to enter into the relevant markets. Now, with the funding scope in place, will you ask the accelerators to prioritize how they're going to use the funding? If they use all the $30 million of funding for renting premises, that would defeat the purpose of the scheme. Also, will venture capitals as well as consultancy firms be allowed to join the scheme?
Two questions. Professor Sun, thank you. To be strict, there is no accelerator in Hong Kong at the moment. We do have something that works akin to an accelerator, but that's obviously not enough, which is why we're trying to introduce more accelerators to Hong Kong. As for the funding scope and the public funding in general, I will ask Mr. Ivan Lee to answer relevant questions. Mr. Rincon asked about footnote number 4. The principle is that we should not provide double benefits to beneficiaries of public funding. This is generally a principle in public finance. For the same project, they cannot apply for funding under different government funding schemes. But a startup can apply for funding for multiple projects. For example, an accelerator would often help with marketing of the startup companies. If a startup company has received financial support for a particular project through the accelerator, the startup may not apply for public funding, additional public funding for that same project. But if they are not receiving support for the project through the accelerator, they can apply to other government funding schemes. So that's my answer to the first question. As for whether we will set a ratio for the different expenses, we will look at the reports, as we said earlier, and we will need to see whether the expenses are reasonable. If they are investing an overly high amount in the venue, we believe it will not be seen as reasonable. As for whether we will impose restrictions for venture capitals or consulting firms to take part in the scheme, we do not have any plans to do so at the moment, because we understand in many places the accelerator programs would be investment programs as well, so we do not want to exclude certain types of companies from participating in the scheme. Thank you. Mr. Sunny Tan, I would first like to express my support for the pilot INT accelerator scheme. I do agree that we have to be proactive. We have this pilot scheme here to recruit good accelerators from the mainland and overseas. And we need to really catch up in the recruitment of the accelerators and startup companies. I would say accelerators consider different factors when they think about whether they should set up operations in Hong Kong. They would not only consider the subsidy provided. So I think we need to think about how we can have policies complement the initiative to recruit more accelerators to Hong Kong and help startups succeed, so as to benefit Hong Kong in the end. Thank you. Professor Sun, I believe you have already answered this question to a certain extent. You can perhaps provide more details. Well, for accelerators, the first step is to have the government promulgate specific measures to recruit the accelerators to Hong Kong. Second, I understand that some accelerator service providers are very interested, and they have already reached out to our other institutions, such as existing science park and cyberport entities, and we hope to provide an additional channel to the companies. Companies incorporated in Hong Kong are allowed to apply There are also other funding schemes available. I think what is important is that we maintain a vibrant INT ecosystem in Hong Kong so that people know there is a bright future for INT in Hong Kong. Of course, we need the support of the Productivity Council as well. You have a platform for companies to go global, and we have accelerators that are coming to Hong Kong to go global. So I think there is much room for collaboration with the Productivity Council in future. Thank you. We have 2 members waiting to speak for the first round and a member waiting to speak for the second round. If you wish to speak for this item, you should come here as soon as possible because I believe I will put the item to vote in 15 minutes. Thank you. Dr. Lo-Wai Kwok. We recently visited the incubator at Shanghai. And the teams there are quite young. We also have youth members of the BPA there, and we were able to get deeper on their specific feedback. We need accelerators on top of incubators and startups. For startups in the incubation program, if they're able to convert their R&D outcomes to actual products, accelerators will then provide better support for them. And we have seen before accelerators providing great help at the Shanghai eHub. And we have seen in particular an enterprise that has a tech that sounds very promising. They really deserve our support. So the commitment is $180 million for implementing the pilot INT accelerator scheme. I definitely support this proposal. We want the efforts to succeed, of course. I think what is important is not just about which organization or body is to provide the relevant services. It is about providing the right services to startup companies, and the INT sector is quite challenging. Even though an accelerator or startup companies having met the basic requirements, they still need much support. After that, they need guidance. They need support in market development. It is only with such support that industrialization can be achieved. So my question is, it is very simple really. How will you help the accelerators and startup companies succeed? Thank you, Professor Sun. Accelerators, as the name suggests, is to accelerate the development of the enterprises. And we have already nurtured 20 unicorns by accelerating the development under the 2 entities, Cyberport and Science Park. We do not have any official accelerators in Hong Kong at the moment, but we have something similar, and I think it is only right for us to make this official now. And we need to not only accelerate the development of locally incubated enterprises, we are trying to bring in more mainland overseas companies to Hong Kong. We also want them to be able to adapt to Hong Kong quickly, and I believe this scheme will definitely help with that. And I expect in future we will be able to nurture many top-notch enterprises through the Accelerator scheme, and we will definitely need your support. Thank you. We have 2 other members waiting to speak. If you wish to speak, please come to the conference room as soon as possible. I will draw the line after Mr. Shanghai Long has spoken, and then I will put the item to vote after Professor Priscilla Leung has spoken. Mr. Shanghai Long, thank you, Chair. I would also like to express support for the proposal. We need, on top of incubators, accelerators to help enterprises develop further, and we have accelerator hubs in different places, say PPYC, and I think these accelerators have really helped nurture startup companies. Right now in Hong Kong, it is very hard to develop an INT ecosystem because we do not have an established market. There is also some problems with adaptation of companies. So I support this $180 million commitment to implement the pilot INT accelerator scheme. I have some suggestions. Right now we are playing catch up, but we have seen some quite successful accelerators developing vertically right now. Say if one is experienced in AI or materials science, there will be benefits if they work in the specific areas. So will we prioritize some technology areas? Because I think it would help if we focus on specific areas. And I also want to ask, you said there will be at least 6 startup service providers under the scheme. Will we accord some priority to establish service providers in the mainland or overseas that can really help us forge a new path? Thank you. Well, the first question has already been answered by the professor. You can still provide a brief reply, Professor, if you want. Thank you. Thank you. We do want more sense times in Hong Kong. And if we had sense time in the science park, wouldn't it have been great? Now, as for what technology areas we are going to prioritize, it would include AI and robotics, data science, life and health technology, new energy materials, advanced manufacturing. As for whether we should prioritize certain markets, I think we will leave it for later because we want to have established service providers, no matter where they're from, to come to Hong Kong. Thank you. Any other members who would like to speak? If not, we'll have Professor Priscilla Leung speak for the second round, and then we'll put the item to vote. I would like to follow up on what I asked earlier. I'm not satisfied with the reply provided by the Secretary. We need to provide better support to the academia. Right now we have the professors having some very out of reach R&D outcomes before, and we had the UGC having some guidelines that say research should produce realizable R&D outcomes. And you say here we have each accelerator having to employ at least 3 full-time staff members to provide R&D support, expert guidance, and business networking. I think we need to have in place some guidelines or encouragement for the accelerators to do more in this regard. And we see some great talents in different parts of the world. If we can encourage enterprises to recruit more talents, I believe that would be ideal. Thank you, Professor Sun.
Yeah.
Well, we aren't imposing restrictions on the 3 full-time staff members. Of course, we encourage them to recruit local professionals. In the assessment process, we do not look at just the 3 full-time staff members employed. We look at what kind of company it is and what kind of development it strives to promote in Hong Kong. Apart from the full-time staff members, the accelerators will offer mentorship as well as expert consultation. These staff members do not necessarily have to work full-time. They could work part-time. These accelerators will be important stakeholders, and we will see them as part of the INT ecosystem in Hong Kong. So we'll look at all the factors when we make the assessment. I hope Professor Leung will be happy with my answer. There being no further questions, I'll now put the item FCR 2025-2644 to vote. Will those in favor of the proposal in this paper raise their hands? Anyone against this proposal? None. I believe the majority of the members who voted are in favor of this proposal. I declare the proposal approved. The next FC meeting will be held on the 19th of September. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.